And welcome to this session. I've called it Training the Drinking Mind. And the first thing I want to say is not to get hung up on that title. We don't do titles here, we don't do labels, and for very good reason. It limits you. So it's not that you have a drinking mind, that you have something that's wrong with your mind. But the thing to understand about a drink problem, and I'm going to lose, if I use the word addiction, I'm going to use it really loosely. But if you have a problem, then you can just call it a drink problem. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So the problem with it is that everything about that problem exists in one place and one place only, and that is in the mind. 95% of drink problems, addiction, is psychological. And so if we train the mind that is drinking, then we are in control of our minds. By all means, comment in the chat. If you're watching it on recording afterwards, then you can leave a comment and I will get back to you. Otherwise, if you've got any questions, then pop them in as we go along. So the problem is in mind. And so what I often hear from women is that I've lost control and I want control back. And if that's you, then underlying that, what is a feeling of having lost or not having control of the mind. And that can seem frightening because what that means is we find ourselves doing things that we don't really want to do. When it comes to drinking, you will probably find yourself at some point in the situation where you wake up in the morning, that standard classic, you wake up in the morning feeling dreadful, you promise yourself that you're not going to drink that day, and then that evening, could even be in the afternoon, you find yourself reaching for a drink when it wasn't what you wanted to do. And then inevitably what happens is after one drink, there's 2 drinks, 3 drinks, 4 drinks, and the whole thing just completely falls apart. So the first thing I thought would be really useful to talk to you about is how that all happens. What is it about the mind and alcohol? Excuse me. What is it about the mind and alcohol which means that this problem happens in the first place? I often talk about it like a trap. How come there's actually been, a falling into the trap? So great. Somebody's just said 2 years alcohol free. Amazing. Fantastic. Welcome to the reconnection. So if we can think about it just for a moment, like training a puppy, it's a really good analogy to understand how the mind falls into the trap, at least partially. So think about having a puppy that you're training. And imagine that the puppy's done something wrong. If you tell the puppy off immediately, the mind of the puppy, the brain of the puppy is going to connect the misdemeanor with the punishment because it's instantaneous. Done something, don't like it. It's a bit like, if you touch outside of a hot kettle and it's an immediate response that you are learning from. So that puppy's going to remember, the pattern's going to be laid down with repetition. It's going to be laid down in its unconscious mind that if it does X, the response is going to be Y, and it's learnt it. Great. Now, if you've ever had a puppy and trained it, if there is a misdemeanor and it is hours later that you may come home and you're telling off the puppy for whatever it is it's done wrong, it is not going to learn because it's unable to link the event that happened hours beforehand with you losing your temper at the puppy, reprimanding it in the now, 5 hours later. It is just impossible. And so it's going to learn something very, very different from what you intended to teach it. So what happens when drinking? So when alcohol is consumed, let's say it's between the hours of 6 o'clock in the evening and 10 o'clock, when some degree of sleepiness kicks in, largely because of the drinking, and that you've got those hours where alcohol might be consumed. So right at the beginning of drinking alcohol, there will be a feeling which is associated with some degree of positivity. Now, what that feeling actually is relief. It's that feeling, which comes with I've got what I want. I've got what I thought I needed. And what often precedes that is a feeling of agitation. So there's agitation, alcohol in glass, and that agitation disappears. So, what the brain of the human does and what your mind does is it associates the consumption of the alcohol, which, by the way, is a highly addictive toxic drug, with that feeling of whatever you might label it. You might label it feeling good, you might label it relief. I invite you to actually dive in and recognize that it is relief and not feeling good. There's a big difference between the two. Then what happens is that normally 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning, sometimes it can be slept through, but it will still happen anyway. Around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, there will be some kind of waking up. There will be something going on. And those feelings are not good feelings. Associated with that is often stress, anxiety, the heart starts pumping, and there's a feeling of just awfulness. And then you'll wake up in the morning very often feeling like that as well. Those feelings are a very long time after the consumption of alcohol. There are physiological reasons for that. In terms of the way this whole thing is then learned, the main reason that at a conscious level, there might be a knowing that, oh my goodness, I'm waking up, I've got shame, I've got guilt, I've got a beating heart that's trying to burst out of my body. There will be a knowledge consciously that alcohol caused that. But that information isn't absorbed into the unconscious mind. So very much like the puppy, this is where we're talking about the puppy, very much like the puppy, what happens is when alcohol is consumed, the linkage of the so-called benefit with the drinking is made, but the subconscious linking of the downsides of it, all that guilt and shame and anxiety and all that, those other things are not directly made in the unconscious mind because of that time lag. And so that is why, without a clear process, without a mechanism for unpicking all of this and for training the drinking mind effectively, just like the puppy, the correct and true connections aren't going to be made. And what that leads to is a complete illusion in the mind, in that drinking mind, that there is actually any benefit to alcohol at all. So the belief in a benefit is there, but actually those strong connections to a downside aren't actually made. And so a different way is required to actually solve the problem. So I'm just going to dive very briefly into some of that. I mean, actually, the whole concept and requirements of training a drinking mind are the subject of a 4-month program, not a 15-minute talk. But what I want to do is to reassure you, if nothing else that I leave you with today, there's the reassurance that because it's in the mind and it's like training a puppy, because we have neuroplasticity, it means at any point in time, no matter where you're starting from, no matter where you're coming from, that mind can be retrained and you can have control of the mind. Because what happens otherwise, if you imagine a puppy just running amok, just running around, it has control and it's chaos. And that is what a mind is like when you don't have control of it. And it's really uncomfortable. I know you would have experienced that yourself. So what is required is to process through the beliefs, the conditioning, and to understand how to interpret memory. These are partially the elements that are required to train the drinking mind, because there literally are no benefits to drinking alcohol. Literally no benefits at all. But because of that very short linkage between the so-called relief effect of alcohol or benefit, whatever you want to call it, and consuming it, that's why those beliefs are there. And they can be very, very strong. The belief in alcohol being fun, being able to alleviate boredom, stress, anxiety, anger, frustration, overwhelm. Boy, it promises so much, doesn't it? Just that alone, allow it to sit. How can anything that promises to do so much actually do any of it? It's just too good to be true, and therefore it's not true. So, training that puppy and understanding how that might work. If you want to just explore it in your own mind, just think about, well, if I was training a puppy, how would I do that? Who is going to be in control here? Because the drinking mind is really like the puppy here, and the part of you that wants change, the true you, the true self, that's like you being the owner of the puppy, because there's two things at play here. Which are you going to allow to dominate? Question mark. Answers below, please. So there is often fear around this. There's often fear in the mind. That is part of the drinking mind that needs to come under control. The fact that there is very often fear, and that is part of the trap. We often fear success and we fear failure. And then sometimes even when we have success, we fear that success not lasting. So understand that fear is part of the illusion and part of the trap as well. And that your true self, that is where your power lies. You will hear me talk very, very often about stepping into your power. The fact is that actually that power is always there and it's already there, but very often it doesn't feel like that, does it? It feels like we're so disempowered that we have no control. And so that's why this is about stepping into your power, into the true you, into the authenticity that is you. And if you've been outside of the trap for some time, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. That power is there, that authenticity just glows out of you. And that affects everything. You know, I talk about a pebble in a pond, but it's more than that, because it doesn't just go this way, it goes every single way. It expands and you expand into your life and into yourself. Alcohol is incredibly limiting. Just imagine your life being run by a puppy. How limited would it be? And so there's an invitation here to expand and grow beyond that limitation. And that is where mastering that drinking mind really comes into its own. By challenging beliefs, laying down new beliefs, understanding memory, utilizing that neuroplasticity, which means everything can change to its absolute maximum to benefit you, to benefit yourself. It is all absolutely there for the taking. So, a drink problem being 95% psychological. First of all, just to reinforce once again that it is not your fault. Alcohol is something that we are virtually forced, social conditioning, to consume. You are not your thoughts, and it is not your problem. Or you are not the problem. Unfortunately, then the only person who can actually step up and do anything about it is you. Coming at it from an understanding, though, that there is no fault here, that it is a conditioning, I hope gives you some reassurance if you're faltering within the trap. And if you're outside it, then great, enjoy your freedom. So thoughts come and thoughts go. And it's a clear invitation here as well to understand that you are not your thoughts. Anything that comes up in the mind is not who you are. And that might sound like a strange concept. What do you mean I'm not my thoughts? Did I ever really think I was? Well, very often you may say to yourself, I am anxious. I am overwhelmed. I need a drink. I want a drink. I want freedom. All those things are thoughts that are coming up in the mind. And the fact that there's that strong association between I and the thought does actually imply that there is a belief that we are our thoughts. But if we were ever the thought, then we would always be it, because we can't sometimes be what we are and sometimes not be what we are. That just doesn't work, does it? We either are or we're not. And so when a thought comes up, a really good way to perceive it is like you would a cloud in the sky. And we all know that those are completely changeable, and that with a strong gust of wind, they've come and they've gone. So thoughts are just like that. And so a superpower that you have, we all have, as a human being, apart from being wonderful, because you're completely wonderful and amazing, just as you are, is that we have the ability to step back and observe. Which means that just like observing the cloud, we can step back and observe our thoughts. And in there is huge power and huge adaptability. So please post any questions for me around this video. I'd love to hear from you and how this is sat, how this is resonating, and what it means to you. And any thoughts, questions, feedback that you have around the idea of training the drinking mind, much like you would take on the task from a point of empowerment to train a puppy to do exactly what you want it to do, for you to have the control over it that you want, so that you can enjoy your life with it without it controlling you. That's all for me for now. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. I've got to figure out how to sign off now. It's a new stream for me. Here we go.